calling it an allergy is just an excuse. It's not good to be picky. Maybe it's because your parents didn't properly deal with your allergies when you were young, right?
With a sneer, my mother-in-law mocked my sister, glancing back and forth between my father and me. Then, as if suddenly remembering something, she exclaimed in an exaggerated voice,
"Oh! She's not great at cooking or cleaning either. Perhaps she wasn't properly taught those things."
She looked at my sister's husband, seeking agreement, and added,
"She's got a cute face, but it's a shame about those other things, isn't it?"
My sister's husband smirked, too. But they won't be laughing for long. After all, they're going to lose everything for making us angry. My name is Nancy. I'm 28 years old, single, and living alone. I'm a dedicated company employee. Given my age, I know it's time to start thinking about marriage, but I'm enjoying my work, and without anyone special in my life, it's something I've only vaguely considered for the distant future. It was during this time that I heard the news of my sister's marriage. My family consists of my father, who runs his own business in our hometown, my mother, a homemaker, and my sister Amy, who is 3 years younger than me. I might be biased, but my father doted on us, allowing us the freedom to pursue whatever we wanted. My mother, always smiling as she watched over my father and us, made our family feel like something out of a picture-perfect story. As for my sister Amy, she was an adorable and charming girl, the kind who could win over everyone around her, regardless of gender. There were times I thought it was unfair how cute she was, or that I envied her, but those thoughts would vanish whenever she came to me, calling, "Nancy! Nancy!" I've always found her irresistibly endearing. My father is the eldest of 5 siblings, most of whom live nearby, so our extended family is quite close. My mother also got along well with my aunts and uncles, so we often gathered for family events. Around that time, we were having one of those gatherings to celebrate the birth of a baby girl, born to my father's youngest sister, who had just had a late-in-life delivery. Although she's technically my aunt, she's only about 10 years older than me, more like an older sister. I was thrilled about my aunt's baby and excited to meet the newborn, so I returned home for the first time in a while. As I was catching up with my aunt and marveling at the tiny, newborn baby, realizing once again how incredible the birth of life is, I heard cheers coming from where my sister was. I glanced over to see my sister, slightly tipsy, her face flushed pink as she swayed while holding a glass of wine in both hands. She's drunk because she tried drinking something she's not used to. Sighing at the sight of my sister, who had likely overdone it in the spirit of celebration, I got up to help her. As I approached, my cousin noticed me, looked up in surprise, and began talking rapidly.
"Nancy! Amy is getting married, isn't she?"
What? I must have looked like a deer caught in the headlights at that moment. I'd heard she had a boyfriend, a civil servant, tall, handsome, the kind of guy who would pick her up after work. But marriage? I alternated my gaze between my cousin and my sister, who was giggling in her tipsy state. Amy, still laughing, said,
"I haven't told you yet. Nancy!"
My cousin, initially surprised, seemed to catch on to the fact that I wasn't satisfied with how casually the news had been dropped and quickly excused herself from the scene. After she left, I sat down on the cushion next to my sister, which still held some of my cousin's warmth. I took the glass that my sister was still holding onto and set it on the table. Then I cupped her cheeks with both hands, turning her to face me. "What's this all about?" Amy, realizing from my tone that I was not amused, finally apologized.
I'm sorry.
As I questioned her further, she confessed that she had asked our parents to keep it a secret from me because she wanted to tell me in person. Since I was home for the first time in a while, she had planned to tell me this time, but the moment never seemed right, and before she knew it, she got drunk and spilled the news to our cousin in the happy atmosphere. As I listened, I couldn't help but think how typical it was of my sister to bungle a surprise like this, yet it was also part of her charm. By the time she finished explaining, I no longer cared that she'd kept it a secret. In fact, I decided to tell everyone, including the part about how it was supposed to be a secret. Our relatives just laughed, saying that's exactly what we'd expect from Amy.
There's one more thing I haven't told you, Nancy.
There's more? I can't imagine what else it could be. I encouraged her to go on in a gentle voice, and she seemed to relax as she continued.
When we get married, I'll be moving in with Jason's family, so I have to move out by next month.
Jason is my sister's boyfriend. Well, husband now. The suddenness of it all made my eyes widen in surprise. You're going to live with his parents? Are you sure that's okay? Amy smiled and reassured me that she had met them several times and that they were really wonderful people. With her marriage announcement and the news that she wouldn't be able to visit home as often, the atmosphere that night was festive and lively. That conversation took place at the beginning of last month. So, she must have moved by now. I thought I should call her soon to check in, but just then, my phone rang. It was just before midnight. Wondering who it could be at this hour, I looked at the screen and saw Amy displayed. What timing, I thought, as I tapped the call button. Hello? I answered, and immediately froze. Before she could speak, I could hear my sister sniffing, and it was clear she had been crying.
Nancy? Sorry to call you out of the blue.
Her voice wavered slightly, as if she was trying to hide the fact that she had been crying. Even through the phone, I could tell she was trying to sound cheerful. It's totally fine. Did something happen? I tried to keep my tone casual, not wanting to make her feel more stressed.
Actually, I'm at the hospital right now.
She couldn't hold back any longer and started to cry. The hospital? Why? Is her husband with her? I had so many questions, but I held back and just listened.
I was brought in as an emergency. I hate to ask, but could you come pick me up?
Why me and not her husband or in-laws? I wondered, but quickly realized there must be a reason. I asked for the name of the hospital, told her I'd be there soon, and ended the call. Since it was late at night, I arrived at the hospital more quickly than I expected. My sister was sitting quietly on a chair in the hospital lobby. I rushed over to her immediately. Up close, she looked much thinner than she had a month ago, and her face was pale, showing clear signs of exhaustion. I sat down beside her and gently asked if she was okay.
I'm sorry for calling you so late. I'm feeling better now.
That's good. But what happened? Why were you rushed to the hospital? She didn't seem to have any major injuries, so I wanted to understand what had happened. Her next words made me doubt my ears.
I ate peanuts.
I blurted out. What? Without thinking. My sister has a peanut allergy. She's dealt with it all her life, and our family has always avoided having peanuts at our meals. Why? Did you accidentally eat some?
No, my mother-in-law.
My mind went blank. I couldn't believe that anyone, knowing about her allergy, would intentionally give her peanuts. I asked if she had told her mother-in-law about the allergy. My sister turned to me, her eyes brimming with tears, and said,
Of course I told her. But she said I shouldn't be picky just because I claim to have an allergy.
Amy continued, explaining that even when she looked to Jason for help, he just told her to eat the peanuts because they were delicious, completely dismissing her concerns. Feeling like she couldn't refuse without causing a scene, my sister tried eating a small amount, hoping it would be okay. But soon after, she started having difficulty breathing. When she asked to be taken to the hospital, no one listened, so she ended up calling an ambulance herself.
My mother-in-law even said, "Are you trying to make me look like the bad guy by exaggerating your symptoms?" So, I decided that I don't want to go back to that house anymore. That's why I called you, Nancy. I'm sorry.
As my sister apologized through her tears, I took her hand and reassured her. It's okay. But even as I held her hand, I could feel my own shaking with anger. For now, let's go back to my place, okay?
Yes. Thank you, sis.
We headed back to my house together, and during the drive, I suggested that we talk to our dad about it tomorrow. Amy was worried about causing trouble for our parents, but I convinced her that keeping quiet about what had happened would only make them worry more. The next day, I called in sick to work and left the house with my sister, heading to our parents' home. When we rang the doorbell, our father answered, his face showing surprise when he saw Amy. He quickly sensed something was wrong from her distressed appearance and my serious expression, and he ushered us inside. After we explained everything that had happened, our father, who had been quietly listening, finally spoke.
I see.
Then he asked,
Are you feeling better now? You should stay here and rest for the day.
Amy nodded, and our father gave her a warm smile. Then he turned to me and said,
Nancy, I need to talk to you.
He asked me,
Are you off today?
Yes. I replied. He explained that he wanted me to come with him to Amy's in-laws' house to pick up her things. Since there were personal items that only another woman should handle, he needed my help. I immediately agreed to go with him. Seeing the worried look on Amy's face, I reassured her. Don't worry, Amy. Just take it easy. You didn't look too well yesterday either, so relax and eat some of Mom's cooking, okay? Amy nodded with a weak smile, and I reluctantly left her behind as I got into Dad's car and headed toward her in-laws' place. Although we didn't talk much during the drive, I could tell from my father's demeanor that he was quietly seething with anger. When we arrived at Jason's parents' house and rang the doorbell, Jason himself answered.
Nancy. And Amy's father, too.
He looked just like I remembered from the one time I'd met him before, a smiling young man who seemed polite and friendly. It was hard to believe that this was the same person who had no understanding of allergies and wouldn't protect my sister when it mattered most. Hello. We're here about my sister. I began, but Jason cut me off before I could finish.
Amy hasn't come home. Nancy, do you know where she is?
The way he spoke made it seem like he was blaming us, as if to say,
Your sister left without notice, and now we're the ones dealing with the consequences.
I nearly snapped back, wanting to point out that if he were really concerned, he should have at least contacted our parents. But I swallowed my words and responded calmly instead. Amy is at our parents' house. After she was taken to the hospital yesterday, I picked her up and she stayed with me. Jason let out a loud laugh, almost as if he found the situation amusing.
She called an ambulance over the peanuts? That's such an overreaction. It wasn't serious enough to warrant an emergency call.
I felt a surge of anger and was about to respond when my father stepped in.
Amy won't be returning here for a while, so we've come to collect her belongings.
Jason's eyes widened in surprise.
She's not coming back.
As he moved closer to confront my father, a voice called out from deeper inside the house.
Jason, what on earth are you making a fuss about?
Jason's mother came hurriedly into the room. When she saw me and my father, her face briefly twisted into a look of disgust before she quickly forced a smile.
Well, it is Amy's father and sister.
I couldn't help but notice that fleeting expression, but we nodded our heads in response as she bowed to us.
Mom, it seems Amy is holding a grudge about what happened yesterday and says she's not coming back.
Jason spoke in a sickeningly sweet tone, as if trying to win his mother over with a poor me attitude. Sensing that things might take a turn, I discreetly started recording the conversation on my phone, which I had already set to recording mode and hidden in my pocket.
Are you talking about peanuts? Amy keeps making a big deal out of it, claiming she has an allergy, when it's really just a matter of picky eating.
She continued, with the same plastered-on smile, saying she only wanted Amy to enjoy the delicious peanuts. It's not about picky eating. Amy has had a peanut allergy since childhood. Even food prepared with utensils that have touched peanuts can cause a reaction, so we've always been very careful. I fought to keep my anger in check as I explained, feeling on the verge of losing my composure. But Jason interrupted with a dismissive tone.
Yeah, but you know.
And continued.
I used to be allergic to milk when I was little. My mom would gradually introduce it to me, mixing it into my food, and now I can drink milk just fine.
He said this proudly, as if his mother had performed some miraculous feat, while she nodded along with a smug smile.
Maybe Amy's peanut allergy is because her parents didn't handle it properly when she was young.
She grinned slyly, glancing back and forth between me and my father, clearly enjoying the tension she was stirring up. Then, as if she had just remembered something, the mother-in-law exaggeratedly exclaimed, "Oh," and continued.
Amy wasn't very good at cooking or cleaning either. Maybe she wasn't properly taught those things. She's got a pretty face, but it's such a shame she's lacking in other areas, don't you think?
She directed this at Jason, who grinned back at her. Feeling like I was on the verge of exploding, I knew I had to get out of there. I'll be taking my sister's belongings now, I declared, asking Jason to show me where they were.
Go right ahead. After all, Amy needs to work on overcoming her allergies and polishing her skills as a wife.
She tossed out those parting words before disappearing back into the house. I hurriedly gathered my sister's things and left their home as quickly as I could. On the drive back, I was so furious that I could hardly think straight, but my father was even more upset. Usually a careful driver, he was now driving in an unusually aggressive manner, clearly seething with anger. When we returned home, Amy rushed to greet us, immediately sensing that something had happened based on our expressions. She repeatedly asked if we were okay. "What are you planning to do now, Amy?" Her face fell, and she looked down, as if the weight of the question had just hit her. To be honest, they didn't show any concern for you at all, I told her. She looked up at me, forcing a smile as she replied, I see.
I guess I was hoping for too much. Things never go as smoothly as you'd like.
As she said this, she stared off into the distance, her eyes glistening with unshed tears, as if she had expected this outcome all along. Based on my mother-in-law's tone, I started to wonder if this incident was just the tip of the iceberg and if there had been other problems before.
They'd throw away the food I made, saying it was too salty, or spill drinks on places I had just cleaned.
Although I had suspected something was wrong, hearing the awful details made my head spin.
I always thought that one day we would come to understand each other.
Seeing her exhausted smile, I could only imagine how much she had endured, and it pained me to think about it.
But after what happened this time, I realized we'll never understand each other. That's why I'm going to get a divorce.
Perhaps relieved that her last bit of hope had been shattered, my sister said this with a bright smile. My father, hearing this, nodded deeply.
You've done well up until now.
He spoke gently, as if reassuring her.
Leave the rest to me.
Hearing this, my sister and I looked at our father with wide eyes. He responded with a mischievous smile.
I've got a plan.
A few days later, he told us that he would be going to pick up my sister's furniture and asked us to come along. My sister and I rode with him to her in-laws' house.
Dad, 3 people isn't enough to move all that furniture, right?
Father laughed heartily.
Don't worry about that. I've got everything arranged.
Although I was curious about what he meant by arranged, I trusted that things would be fine since it was him saying so. As we neared the house, I began to dread the thought of seeing those 2 again, but then cars began filling the driveway at my sister's in-laws' place. It was a large driveway, typical of a countryside house, but it quickly filled up. My sister and I were shocked as people began pouring out of the cars, our relatives, all arriving one after another.
Now we won't have any trouble moving the furniture.
Watching my father greet the arriving relatives, I finally understood what he meant by arranged. Noticing the large number of cars and people, my sister's mother-in-law and Jason came rushing out of the house in a panic.
Annie!
What is the meaning of this? Showing up with so many people all of a sudden?
They looked as though they were about to lash out at my sister, so I quickly stepped in front of her to protect her. Then, my father stepped in front of me, and with a smile, said to them,
Thank you for everything. My daughter has decided to divorce, so we're here to collect her belongings.
At my father's words, my mother-in-law frowned.
Divorce? I haven't heard anything about that. And we already packed up Amy's things recently, didn't we?
Despite the tense atmosphere, my father continued with the same cheerful smile.
Most of the furniture here is from when my daughter lived alone. Since it's furniture, I brought about 23 of our relatives along.
With that, he turned to the nearby relatives.
All right, I'm counting on you.
The relatives began streaming into the house. Jason, perhaps trying to stop them, went inside with them. That left just me, my sister, my father, my mother-in-law, and 2 others outside.
First, this is our lawyer, and she's my daughter's cousin.
Cousin? What does she have to do with this?
Mother-in-law looked up and down at the cousin and scoffed.
And she's just kid.
Indeed, One of the cousins was still a university student. As I wondered why the cousins were here, one of them spoke up.
I'm studying law at university. After hearing what my uncle said and listening to Nancy's recorded statements, I came because your comments could potentially be criminal.
The cousin stated calmly. It was true that the cousin was quite intelligent and was studying law at university.
Forcing someone to eat something while knowing they have an allergy is highly criminal.
Mother-in-law laughed derisively.
You're just a student, aren't you? What do you know about this?
She said this while covering her smirking mouth with her hand. The cousin seemed unaffected by the mother-in-law's comments and continued as if nothing had changed.
I expected you to say that, so I brought a lawyer. We have a professional here, not just an amateur.
The mother-in-law, perhaps forgetting that the lawyer had already been mentioned, finally looked at the lawyer.
This case can also include a claim for damages. Of course, the divorce can be finalized.
Upon hearing this, the mother-in-law's face turned pale as she seemed to finally grasp the situation. She rushed over to my sister and grabbed her hand.
Amy! You wouldn't really go through with the divorce, would you? I've been so worried since you collapsed.
Let go of me.
My sister interrupted the mother-in-law and wrenched her hand free. It was rare to see my usually smiling sister glare at her like that.
When I collapsed, not a single person was concerned. You all continued your meal as if I wasn't there. I will be going through with the divorce, and I will be claiming damages.
Just as my sister finished speaking, a scream from Jason came from inside the house.
Mom! All the furniture is being stolen!
Seeing Jason clinging to the mother-in-law, crying, my sister exclaimed,
What? Stolen? You're the one who had everything moved here under the pretense that you needed it. Those were my belongings that I paid for.
As Jason tried to retort, the mother-in-law stopped him by grabbing his arm and whispered to him that the lawyer was present, which I overheard. Thanks to the relatives' efficient work, the furniture was quickly moved out. My father thanked the relatives and then turned to the pale-faced mother-in-law and Jason.
It seems all the belongings have been collected. We'll handle any further communication through our lawyer.
He started to push my sister and me toward the exit but turned back as if he had just remembered something.
I've heard of cases where people have been forced to eat things they're allergic to and have died. I'm glad that didn't happen to your son when he was young.
His smile was genuine, but his eyes were not. We all got into the car, and initially, everyone was silent, but my father soon broke the silence with laughter.
Wow, the two had the best expressions.
Seeing my father's genuine smile, which I hadn't seen in a long time, both my sister and I started to chuckle, which turned into full laughter. We all laughed heartily as we drove home. It was a rare moment of genuine joy. Afterward, the divorce was officially finalized. Since my sister's furniture had been removed, the house was left empty. The furniture originally in the house had been sold when my sister got married, as it was expected that her furniture would be used. Additionally, the money from the sale had been spent without my sister's knowledge, so there were no savings left. With the emergency transport and the arrival of the relatives, news of the divorce and the mistreatment spread quickly, leading the in-laws to move away as if fleeing. They were reportedly working tirelessly from morning till night to handle the alimony payments, moving expenses, and to replace the furniture. My sister's health has improved, and her previously thin body is gradually returning to its normal state. She and I are now living together in my home until she finds a new place. Although there are times when the noise of having my sister around reminds me of how much has changed, I appreciate having someone at home. I'm enjoying the days, laughing with my sister as we did in the past. How did you find this story? Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. See you in the next video.